Are you preparing for Week 13 of your fantasy football season and realize that your team is in a bye week hell? Well, then it's time to work the Week 13 waiver wire. I'm Anthony Aniano from RotoBaller Radio and RotoBaller.com with an early look at Week 13 waiver wire. Let's dive right into it. First, let's take a look at some injuries from Week 12. Wide receiver position got hit a little bit. Saints especially. Chris Olave, a concussion. Rashid Shaheed, a thigh injury. Demario Douglas of the New England Patriots, who was going to be one of my ads this week, had a nice game, 9 targets, 6 receptions, 49 yards. He leaves with a head injury, takes him off my waiver wire list for this week. Dorian Thompson-Robinson of the Cleveland Browns, quarterback, leaves with a head injury as well. So you had some injuries to deal with, and like we said in the opening, Week 13 is a brutal bye week for your fantasy teams. Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo Bills, Chicago Bears, Las Vegas Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, Minnesota Vikings, and the New York Giants. So when you look at like Lamar Jackson, Gus Edwards, Justin Fields, Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, the Vikings receiving core, the Raiders, Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams, a tough bye week coming up here on Week 13, a hellish bye week, as some would say in Week 13. So we got to take a look at that waiver wire. As always, Yahoo roster percentages, 50% or less is our talking point. Recording it, it's the early waiver wire, so we record before the Sunday night and Monday night matchups. So obviously things can change if major injuries occur, so forth and so on over those games. Just hit me up on Twitter at @AnianoFantasy, and I'll answer any other questions you have about those players. We'll start at the quarterback position. Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers, one of our top 2 quarterback ads of the week, 52% rostered, so right there at the limit of where we like to go. 52% rostered on Yahoo. Third big game in a week. He had a great game Thanksgiving afternoon against the Detroit Lions. 22 of 32, 268, and those 3 touchdown passes. Ran the ball 3 times for 39 yards as well. In a 6-point per touchdown passing format, finished with over 32.5 fantasy points. He's got 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions now in his last 3 games with 20 or more fantasy points. Green Bay's patience with Jordan Love is starting to pay off. That's a key when you're evaluating a quarterback. You have to be patient. Not enough people are, in my opinion, in the fantasy community. So Jordan Love now really rolling. Christian Watson has a big game. Reed, we'll talk about him later, still under-rostered on Yahoo.com. And Jordan Love's going to have to throw the ball to keep up with the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 13. Second ad, and I mentioned him last week. He was my boom play of the week at the quarterback position. Matthew Stafford sitting at 47% rostered. And when you look at the impact Kyren Williams had on that Rams team with his ability to run the ball and catch the ball out of the backfield, it benefited the entire team, especially Matthew Stafford. He's available in 53% of leagues, and he's coming off the best game of his season against the Arizona Cardinals in that blowout victory. 25 of 33, 229, 4 touchdown passes, 2 to Higbee and 2 to the running back Williams. He did throw 1 interception. Again, 6-point per TD format, 31.4 fantasy points. Tougher matchup for sure next week against the Cleveland defense, but that defense is on the field a lot in Cleveland now, considering they essentially don't have a capable quarterback. And you saw Russell Wilson and the Broncos put up points against Cleveland. At the running back position, not much to make of the running back position this week, but a couple of players who can help if you're desperate. First is Jeff Wilson of the Miami Dolphins. With Ahmed out and Achane out, Jeff Wilson emerged as the primary backup to Raheem Mostert and was productive Friday against the New York Jets. 11 carries for 56 yards. That's over 5.5 yards per carry. Had 3 catches on 3 targets for 17 yards as well, finishing with a total of 73 yards and in a PPR format, 10.3 fantasy points. Now things change if Devin Achane is active next week at the Washington Commanders. Jeff Wilson's value takes a hit. However, if Achane, they sit him another game with the knee, we know Ahmed's going to be out for a while. Jeff Wilson, in a complimentary role to Raheem Mostert, is putting up double-digit fantasy points. Also available, Royce Freeman of the Los Angeles Rams. If you have Kyren Williams, get Royce Freeman on your team. He's the handcuff right now. He is the number 2 running back on that team. and still being utilized. This week against Arizona, 13 carries, 77 yards, and that late touchdown. He's got 30 carries in his last 2 weeks, 13.7 fantasy points. He's finished with about 13 points each of the last 2 weeks as well. He's available in 87% of leagues. It's not a great spot. He's a desperation flex play, but if you need it, he is available next week. The Rams play the Cleveland Browns. And finally, Samaje Perine of the Denver Broncos. Javonte Williams did leave the game temporarily due to injury. Came back, though. Samaje Perine now, though, 2 straight games with at least 13 fantasy points in a PPR format. 7 carries, 55 yards, the rushing touchdown. 1 catch for 11. Last week, in week 11, he got most of his fantasy points on 7 catches. This week, it was the rushing yards and the rushing touchdown. But either way, Samaje Perine, over 26 fantasy points over the last 2 weeks on the road against the Houston Texans next week. Are the Denver Broncos playing significantly better football than they were just a few weeks ago? Samaje Perine is available in about 80% of Yahoo leagues. At the wide receiver position, the number 1 wide receiver to add going back to Green Bay is Jayden Reed. I've talked about him now 3 weeks in a row. Still under rostered. On Yahoo, he's available in 53% of leagues. He's rostered in 47% of those formats. He had a team-high 8 targets on Thanksgiving Day, 4 catches, 34 yards, and a touchdown. Continued to be involved in the running game with 2 carries for 16 yards, 15 fantasy points on the day for Jayden Reed, who now has 15 or more fantasy points in 3 straight games. Green Bay just continues to find ways to get him the ball. I would expect the same next week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Up 2, take a look at Curtis Samuel of the Washington Commanders. 28% rostered, 12 targets, a team high against the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day. 9 catches for 100 yards. He was Sam Howell's safety blanket throughout the day against Dallas. Should be a high-scoring event against the Miami Dolphins in Week 13 for Washington and Curtis Samuel. And finally, my final wide receiver is Jalen Hyatt of the New York Giants. Now, the downside to Jalen Hyatt, the Giants are on a bye in Week 13, so he's not going to help you much. He's available in 97% of leagues. And finally, the New York Giants realized he is the best wide receiver on that Giant team. Better than Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell, Wan'Dale Robinson, and anybody else. Isaiah Hodgins had a touchdown, but Jalen Hyatt is the big play threat, and Tommy DeVito can throw a deep ball, and he did that to Jalen Hyatt on Sunday in their victory over the New England Patriots. Team high 6 targets, 5 receptions, 109 yards, 15.9 fantasy points. Again, though, Giants with a bye Week 13, so if you need the help, Jalen Hyatt's not going to provide it. I mentioned Demario Douglas at the start. I wanted to add him today, but until we get clearance, and the tradition right now this year, I don't want to call it tradition, but the pattern with concussions this season is players have been missing a minimum of 1 game, and that's where we're at with Demario Douglas. Finally, at the tight end position, Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everybody drafted him as a top 12 tight end. He was injured. He let you down. He hit the waiver wire. Finally emerges. Is it a coincidence that the Pittsburgh Steelers have a new offensive coordinator, that they found Pat Freiermuth again and realized we got a pretty good pass-catching tight end? That might very well be the case. Freiermuth available in 53% of leagues, targeted 11 times by Kenny Pickett, 9 catches for 120 yards, 21 fantasy points, and he goes up against an Arizona Cardinal defense that just allowed 2 touchdown passes to Tyler Higbee. You can throw to the tight end against that Arizona Cardinal defense. So to recap, my top 5 free agents to add off the waiver wire for Week 13 of the fantasy football season. Number 5, Jordan Love, quarterback, Green Bay Packers. And number 4, Matthew Stafford, quarterback, Los Angeles Rams. Number 3, Pat Freiermuth, tight end, Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 2, Curtis Samuel, wide receiver, Washington Commanders. And the number 1 add for Week 13 of your fantasy football season, Jayden Reed, wide receiver, Green Bay Packers. All right, everybody, don't forget, head over to RotoBaller.com right now. Sign up for any premium pass. Use the promo code ACES and save at checkout. Like and subscribe right here to the RotoBaller YouTube channel. And download the RotoBaller app. It's free. 6 great sports right there on your phone. Whether DFS or season-long format, whatever you're looking for, RotoBaller.com has you covered. Give me a follow on Twitter at @AnianoFantasy. and we'll see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.